All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this young adult mentor video chat. I am Sarah Nicolas. I'm going to be the moderator tonight, and I am on the board for Pitchwars, and I am the agent liaison this year. If you don't know what Pitchwars is, you can find out more information about it at pitchwars.org. But in summary, it is a 100% volunteer-run annual mentoring event where authors and industry professionals choose one author to mentor through a submission process, and then they do a full round of edits, and then it ends in an agent showcase. So definitely go check out pitchwars.org if you're not entirely sure what it is. You can find out a whole bunch of information on there. I'm checking my list to make sure I don't forget any announcements. Wish lists have been announced, so we can talk about wish lists and genres now, but try not to keep. We won't be asking any questions that are like, "Are you interested in this thing that I wrote?" We won't be answering those questions, so you can ask that on Twitter though. If you're watching on Twitter or somewhere else like Facebook, like you're in the Twitter window, you're probably going to want to click through to YouTube so that you can participate in the chat and ask questions. However, we do have our social media director, Limar, on Twitter today, and she's going to be taking some questions from Twitter if you ask them on Twitter, but they may not make it here on time because it kind of depends on her seeing them. So you may want to switch over to YouTube if you want to ask questions. We also have today Managing Director Sonia Hartle is moderating the chats. So thank you, Sonia, for volunteering for that today. You can go ahead and start asking questions now because we're going to get right into them as soon as I bring the mentors on screen. Submissions open on September 27th. And that is like the start of September 27th. So right after midnight on the 26th. And you can see the schedule for other upcoming chats. They're in a playlist on my YouTube channel, and you can also find them on our blog. They are a pinned post on our blog, and you'll be able to see the Twitter chats there as well. And now we're going to bring on our mentors. So first up is Dante.
Hi, I'm Dante Medema, and my book, The Truth Project, comes out October 13th. It's about a girl who finds out via an online ancestry kit that she's the product of an affair. And I am a first-time mentor and co-mentoring with Liz Lawson. And yeah, that's all.
Emily.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Golden. I'm a freelance developmental editor and book coach with Golden May Editing. And I am a first-time mentor, co-mentoring this year with JL, whose debut Wings of Ebony comes out February 3rd, and you definitely want that. And I work mostly with YA and speculative fiction authors. And yeah, excited to be here.
Didn't unmute myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Lyndsay Ely. This is my 4th year mentoring Pitchwars. My debut novel, Gunslinger Girl, came out in 2018, and it was a Pitchwars novel. I'm also an art director and worked in publishing for about 10 years. And the only other thing I'll say is that I'm excited to be here, but I was supposed to be at a My Chemical Romance concert right now, so I'm a little bummed about that.
All right. You're muted. There you go.
Okay, hi everyone. I am Jennieke Cohen. I'm the author of Dangerous Alliance, which was my Pitchwars book in 2016, which is when I was a mentee, and it is a historical romance about a Jane Austen fan in the 19th century. And anyway, so yeah, I was a mentee in 2016, and I was a co-mentor in 2018 with Toby Easton.
Hi, my name is Ayana Gray. This is my 2nd year as a Pitchwars mentor, and I'm also assisting the committee in an advisory kind of capacity this year. I'm co-mentoring with Maya Ibrahim, whose debut Spice Road comes out next year, and then my debut, Beasts of Prey, will come out in spring 2022.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank y'all for coming on tonight. we already have questions, so we can go ahead and jump right in. Fluffy Fluff, which is a great username, asks, how long is the gap between turning in your manuscript and the mentors asking for the manuscript full?
So I think that depends on everyone and how quickly people read, and like how I think it's going to depend. And I don't think anyone can do like a set time frame for that, just because it'll depend on how many submissions we all get. It'll depend on when we get to yours in the flow of things, I think, and whether it's something we decide we want to ask for more on.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'd say it's not unusual for me to start asking for stuff, first day reading submissions just because I'm excited. And then I usually slow myself down because I can't ask for 500 things. So I will usually like tone it down a little bit and then, maybe ask in batches over the next few days. And, especially as I go back and reread things a second time, like, kind of space it out over the open window time.
Anybody else want to chime in? I do know some mentors, they'll request them, early, and then if they haven't found what they're looking for, they will make late requests too. So requests can literally come in like a couple days before our deadline. So yeah, don't like turn your email off if you didn't get a request the first week. All right, Sophia asked, have any of you ever worked with an international mentee?
I have. My mentee, Hannah, I want to say she lives in France, but when I was her mentor, she moved to another part of Europe. And so, it's interesting because just by chance in my personal life, I already have to deal with time zone differences. So for me, it wasn't a challenge. I don't think any mentor is going to let that be something that wouldn't make them pick a mentor that they really wanted, a mentee that they wanted to work with. My co-mentor, Maya Ibrahim, lives in Australia. So again, I'm just used to working off different time zones. But yeah, I think the only thing is just the only time it really makes a difference is there are certain deadlines and dates. Like for example, the showcase, it goes live at a certain time. So you just have to remind yourself to either be awake in that Eastern time zone in the US or get your mentor to be, let you know when you wake up. But generally it goes seamlessly.
Yeah, and Addie, who's going to be in the second hour of this chat, is an international mentor too. So you can talk to her. Ellie asks a formatting question for Sarah. I love formatting questions. Should the first paragraph in a new chapter scene break be indented for our submission? I've seen conflicting sources on this rule. The reason why you've seen conflicting sources is it honestly does not matter. You can do it either way. But for the form, it's going to probably strip your tabs anyway, and don't worry about that when you submit your initial package. Gray asks, what's something I should avoid putting in my query letter? What do you not want to see in query letters? No one wants to answer.
Anything crossing personal boundaries, you think that's common sense, but worth saying because I've had it happen. Just remember that even though this is really fun and there's a cute owl named Poe and this is really great, it's still like you do want to be professional. Like this is very much what you'll do when you're querying agents. So maintain that professionalism, and the same way you wouldn't say certain things to like someone you didn't know very well. Be careful about making sure you don't cross any personal boundaries. If you wouldn't say to someone passing by on the street, maybe don't say it in a letter.
You said Poe's name, so he appeared in the corner there. Anybody else want to answer the question? Anything you don't want to see in a query letter? I will say that, because I've seen a lot of conversation around it, is we do say in our submission guidelines not to personalize the query to mentors. I know there's some confusion on that, so you can go ahead and leave that out. And I feel like that's just like one less thing for you to worry about. Right? Ebony, who is a regular on my channel, just said, Ayana, I love your hair.
Thank you.
All right, so Manuel asks, the majority of recommendations I've read, if you've published as an indie, is to leave that out of the query bio when querying agents unless you've sold a ton of books. Thoughts? And I'm assuming he's querying a new book and not the book that he has previously published.
I mean, this is one of those things that could go like either way, because, you know, I know, you know, for example, you may be querying a novel that has nothing to do with what you sell as an indie author. So say the example popping to my head is like, say you have erotica on, you know, like Amazon, but you're querying a YA fantasy novel. Like you don't have to mention that, but you could, you know, like, I don't think it's going to turn any agent off particularly to see that you like have I think a lot of people worry that an agent might think that like you having a side hustle as an indie author is gonna be like a bad thing, and it really isn't. I don't think. I haven't seen a lot of agents worry about that sort of thing.
All right. Yeah, I will say it depends. Like if we're talking agents, I mean, there are probably some agents who still have kind of that stigma about self-publishing. But in that case, if I was, well, I am an indie author also, but if I was looking for an agent who had that problem, I probably wouldn't want to work with them anyway. So, yeah, I mean, there are some agents that will turn off, but it's kind of your decision. I don't think it would be a problem for any of our mentors. I don't think our mentors feel that way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think it makes a difference for pitch wars, but yeah, I mean, obviously that's something to be concerned with when you're querying agents, but yeah, for this purpose, I don't know that it matters too much.
Yeah. Jay asked, how do you feel about lovers to enemies in fantasy?
Give it over.
Please, let's go the other way. It's so nice to see them like breaking apart and being angry at each other.
Love it. Yes.
All right. Okay, Sarah Evans asks, I'm assuming this is not Sarah Evans, the singer, because she has an agent. How did you find out about Pitch Wars originally? I found out after falling in love with an advanced reader's edition of Children of Blood and Bone and Googling Tomi Adeyemi for the first time.
Can anyone else not remember? Because I have completely forgotten.
I was going to say, I don't know if I remember.
I was a mentee in 2015, and I absolutely remember I entered with 3 of my other friends in my writing group, and me and one other got in, and we were all like very excited about it, but I have no idea how we found out about it in the first place. Like, not a clue. Like, I guess maybe Twitter. It's like, that's the only thing I can think of.
I found out about it at a conference at PNWA. One of the people had mentioned it, and I was like, what's Pitch Wars? And me and 3 other girls that I met at the conference, we all entered together.
I don't remember when I first heard about it, but I first got sort of introduced to it when JL was submitting to Pitch Wars, and she was all about it. And so I was one of her critique partners at the time for an early version of Wings of Ebony. So that was kind of fun.
I think I heard about it on Twitter, but it took me a while to actually decide to submit, because I think I'd heard about it for a few years, but I didn't know if it was for me or whatever. And then in 2016, I think I was like I was trying to decide if I wanted to be completely done with that book, with Dangerous Alliance. Actually, the book that became my Pitch Wars book, I was kind of on the fence, like, do I want to self-publish it? Do I want to be, do one more round of queries and be done? And so I found out, I checked the Pitch Wars schedule, and it turned out it was happening like almost that same month that I was polishing it up. So that was my little story of how I got involved.
Cool. Oh, I was what did we call it then? I think we called it Ninja Mentor, but then we changed that because we don't use that term anymore. But I was a Ninja Mentor in 2012, the very first year. So I didn't get submissions, but basically I was allowed into everyone's submissions after they had made their choice, and then I was allowed to choose from those. We did it very differently then, obviously. But I had participated in some of Brenda's contests before then, because she used to run other contests as well on her blog. A lot of people don't know this, but Brenda kind of invented like the Pitch Wars concept and the PitMad concept. I mean, she had other contests and it kind of evolved into what it is. But yeah, so I had participated in some of our other contests, and I was an intern at Entangled at the time. And so she invited me to do that. So it was cool. I like the stories. All right. Briannica asks, for those of you who have mentored before, how many submissions did you receive in previous years?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ayana.
No, you're good. No,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, so in 2018, I believe we got about 200. So, it was a lot, but I'm curious to see what happens this time.
Yeah, last year I got 261, and I only know that number because I had to look it up. And I am an overachiever and like to have spreadsheets and charts and things to capture that stuff. But I don't know what this year will look like.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, but I feel like it's ranged about maybe 130 to 230. I feel like the number I had last year was in the 230s, something like that.
All right. I realized the other two you haven't been mentors before. I was watching some old videos of mine. It was like either 2013 or 2014. And I had 60 entries, and it was the most entries that any mentor had because my wish list was so wide. And I was like, oh, bless my heart. That's not that many anymore. All right. Oh, this is an interesting question. David asks, can you give your impressions of where the YA market is headed over the next couple years?
It's all headed over to the middle grade market. Sorry, did I just say that? Yeah, that's more of like just like an industry trend, though. I think that people, I don't think that's a secret at all. There was a lot of YA stuff that came out between like 2012 to 2016, 17, 18, and the market's kind of started to dip a little bit on the YA side, and middle grade is kind of on its upswing. I used to work in publishing, so like I used to pay attention to this stuff a lot, and obviously still do. But in terms of like actual genres, I think about this a lot, and I have no idea. Does anyone else have any like great ideas? Like any insights?
I have some opinions because I have some friends that are either getting picked up by agents right now or are selling books right now. And a lot of what I'm seeing get picked up is contemporary versus fantasy.
Yeah, there's definitely a ton of contemporary getting picked up right now.
Yeah, and I'm ready
and
for
horror.
it.
Horror thriller has been really big in YA.
And witch books.
Yes.
I have strong feelings as a YA fantasy author. So I feel like there's this perennial YA is dead, YA fantasy is dead, and it's like, I mean, people have gotten really in their feelings about it. And I think it's because it's such a general thing to just throw out. Here's the reality. Getting an agent, selling a book, all of these things are statistically really, really hard already. And it doesn't matter if YA is booming. It doesn't matter if YA is not booming. It's always going to be hard. To me, YA, young adult fantasy and young adult is a very saturated space because young adult books are not, the readership of young adult is not necessarily just teens. You get into adults and there's a whole thing about that. I went on sub this summer during a pandemic when everyone was saying YA is dead and it was really stressful. And I remember feeling really badly and feeling like I missed my shot and why couldn't I have written faster? But here's the thing to take a lot of heart in. No matter like how saturated YA becomes, there can't just not be YA. Like there's going to be a young adult section at the bookstore and there will be, you know, the big names, but we can't, and I'm not going to like name anybody because I don't want to be accidentally shady. We can't just have like a shelf of the same author. Like people they'll want something new. So publishers have to acquire new stuff. It just means that you might have to work that much harder. And I think it's a good thing because it forces people to really come up with fresh takes and original ideas that feel new. And that gets the excitement going, and that makes YA, have its upswings again. So I know it's scary, and you're going to have to work harder, and it's competitive, but it's always been competitive. But there's always a shot. Like, there's always a shot. If your heart is in young adult and young adult fantasy, don't not write it because you're afraid of that. I feel like really strongly about that.
No, you're totally right. Like the market never goes away, and fantasy is such like, I mean, look at like the fantasy market and adult, the sci-fi market and adult, like that never goes away. There's always strong call for that, even if it's like in paperback originals and stuff like that, which I feel like I saw somebody tweeting like, let's bring back YA paperback originals. And I'm like, yes, come on, let's bring that. Like, I think we've gotten really hung up on like all these like fancy hardcovers and like, no, there's like other spaces for it,
There are people who only read young adult fantasy, like explicitly. And if you go on Goodreads, when they do their like big award, I forget what it's called, but their annual books of the year, there's actually a whole category for best YA fantasy of the year. Then there's YA contemporary. So it's very clear that, I mean, there are huge audiences in both spaces. So don't worry.
I will say, I think Ayana's being a little humble because her book deal was very big at a time when people were saying no YA fantasy. And so that means she wrote something people really want, right? I personally, just from a purely like selfish area, want paranormal because I just love paranormal. But I don't know if it's happening in a big way or not. We'll see.
I really want vampires to come back. Everyone's like sort of like, there's like whispers of it, and I'm like, come on, bring it back.
Well, what's funny is in the YA indie market right now, Fae is huge. Like it's probably the biggest segment in indie YA right now, which is strange because like a publisher won't touch Fae YA right now for anything. All right, let's go to the next question. Laura asked a question I can just answer real quick. When calculating word counts, do you count hyphenated words as one word or two? Microsoft Word counts them as one word, but just whatever your word processing software uses, just use that. And I know that because during NaNoWriMo, people will intentionally unhyphenate words to get more words. All right. X10 asks, is it appropriate or okay to query mentors? I queried last time, this time again. I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, like I can't take no. Different book, same genre. Yes. I will say, the year Lee and I co-mentored, there was someone who had submitted to me before who I didn't request from. And she told me later that she was not going to submit to us because of that. And then we had something in our wish list that's like, if you have this means this, and you do not query or you do not submit to me, I will die and then I will haunt you. And she had that thing, and she's like, well, I guess I'll submit to them. And then she ended up being our mentee. So, all right. Jay asks for new adult subs. Are any of you taking new adult? Just raise your hand. Okay, a couple, cool. Will the pitchwars submission form allow us to choose from a pool of both YA taking NA and adult taking NA, or will we have to choose? I do believe that you can choose from either. I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure that's what we landed on last year. Does anyone else remember? I think you can choose from either, but Jay, I'll message you after. I'll find out for sure and message you after. Jay is also a regular on my channel. So we submit the same query to different mentors. Yes, the same query goes to all 4 mentors. Oh, Lyndsay, I enjoyed Gunslinger Girl. Do you or any of the other authors here have any advice for other alternate history authors?
No, because when I decided whether I was going to make Gunslinger Girl alt history or alt future, I was like, alt history takes research. Future, I can just make it up. So that's actually one of the hardest things I think about doing alt history is that you you do sort of break the rules, but you try to ground it in stuff that's like real and like actual reality. So I guess I just say do your research. It's the work, but you got to do it. So that being said, I love alt history stuff. So just throwing that out there.
So the book I'm writing now is actually alt history. So I would completely agree with that. You need to do some research. You need to figure out what you're changing and why, because you can get into problems down the road where you think you've changed one thing. For example, well, I won't do specifics, but I changed one thing in history and then decided to go down this road. And then I realized that I had then to change other things. So it becomes a whole, it's a whole world in and of itself. And you can't exactly rely on the history because you've taken a different path. I mean, in one respect, it's really nice because you can, you can then create the world. But on the other hand, it's difficult because you feel like you've painted yourself into a corner in certain places. And but that's also me coming from straight historical, where I was very clear about trying to be as historically accurate as possible. So that could be partly my own issue, where I like to be extremely accurate, but now that I am, the master of this world, I can kind of do whatever. So it's an interesting and completely different sort of experience. I don't know if that was helpful though.
All right. Jennifer, I'm just going to answer your question real quick. Can you query an agent if your book was already self-published? We did talk about it a little bit before, so you may want to rewind after we're done and watch that. But if you're querying the book that was self-published, it's going to be a real hard road for you, unless you sold like 10,000 or more copies. But if you're querying a new book, you're more than welcome to do that. Jill asks, another new adult upper YA question. Would all of your instincts be to age down a character in their early 20s, or does it depend on content and impact to the story?
Absolutely depends on contact.
So I went on sub this summer, and I subbed to adult and YA editors because my book, even though the characters are young, like the content wise, it could have fit. But what I learned, and I think I'm going to credit Laura Zatz, she's an agent, for saying this on her podcast, which is great. Young adult books are about people trying to find their place in the world. That's the center, the heart of a young adult story. Versus adult, actually, I mean, age is important, but that's the way to tell, kind of where something, if you want to pick where it fits, and you're not sure, figure out like, what are your main characters' goals? Are they trying to like figure out their place in the world? Are they trying to change the world? Or is their adventure something more internal, like an internal conflict or battle? And that can kind of help. Maybe that's confusing, but I really like that because as a young adult, as a teenager, that often is, whether you're a wizard trying to find your powers, or whether you're a girl dealing with like, the mean boy at your high school, like you're still trying to find your place in society at large. So if that sounds like your kind of story, that tends to lean more YA. And that's the feedback I got from editors who were like, this is really good, but it definitely feels more YA. So
yeah, it can be really hard to tell sometimes. And I always kind of come back to the example of A Darker Shade of Magic, because the characters kind of run between, I believe, like 18 to about 25-ish. And you could absolutely have seen this book being marketed as YA, like super easily, but it was marketed as adult. And it really works in that perfect like middle space that really makes you wish that new adult was a fantasy genre thing. That's the kind of stuff that I love, and like one of the things that I definitely look for. And then another example would be like the Poppy War, which when you start it, I was like, this reads like YA, and then it went really not YA like really quickly. So you could see why, like, yeah, no, we absolutely have to market this one as adult. But yeah, just to add on another shout out to Laura Zatz, who's actually my agent, and her podcast Print Run, which talks about a lot of this stuff and is actually like really, really informative.
I didn't know that. That's so cool. She's awesome.
Fun fact, actually. So I didn't get an agent through Pitchwars. as well. Not everyone does. And I believe that my mentor showcase, our mentee showcase happened in November of 2015, and Laura made the offer in December of 2015. And one of the things that I always credit Pitchwars is that almost everything that she commented on my manuscript at the time had been addressed in Pitchwars. So I was basically able to just hand her like, oh, look, here you go. So it's actually like just fantastically wonderful. So.
Oh, that's cool. In 2015, was it the one month edit window?
Or I don't remember.
6 weeks.
Oh, that could have been right.
Yeah.
Can't remember. It was definitely shorter than we do now.
Yeah. Kids these days have no idea what we suffered in the past. We had 1 month revision. Yeah, it was rough. All right. Victoria asks, how long did it take each of you to get an agent, and what helped you the most in doing so? I think Lyndsay kind of just answered that question, but for everyone else.
For me, I was writing for, let's see, probably 10 years before I got an agent, but only seriously about 5. I did not get an agent with the first 2 projects I queried because they weren't ready. And then with the third, it was pretty fast. I think that was it. That was the question.
Yeah, I queried one project before Gunslinger Girl that I'd been writing for quite a while before that. And my first novel that I queried was just a full-on mess. Like, I think it got 1 request out of the 60 or 70 queries that I sent out. And looking back, it's really funny because I can just see like what pitch letter doesn't work, opening chapter doesn't work. It's just like so many things. And a lot of that is just like the experience of going through it and like seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, talking to other writers, getting into things like pitch wars and like meeting other writers who can kind of like share their experiences with you. So you get the benefit of that. Working with my in-person or my in real life writing group and, sharing their experiences with querying, so I think actually, just to actually answer the question, Gunslinger Girl, I think I started querying it in January, February 2015. And like I said, December 15, this was almost a full year before I got an offer on that book.
I'm one of those people like Dante. It took at least, I think, 11 years off and on of querying. And I'm not, obviously, I wasn't like, I wasn't doing this full time for 10 years, 11 years. I was going back and forth, putting it aside, coming back to it. Like life got in the way as it does. And, but yeah, so it took a while. But after Pitch Wars, I think it was like Pitch Wars ended my year in November, and then I think it took me until April to get an agent of the following year. And so it was relatively quick. It felt long, but after Pitch Wars, it was relatively quick. So yeah, I credit Pitch Wars with helping me with my career for sure.
Did we get everyone who wants to answer? I love that you mentioned it, Lyndsay, because the first book I queried was also a disaster. My query was great because I was a publicist then, so I knew how to write a query letter, and I got a lot of requests, but I never even heard back from like anyone. And I went back and read it, and I was like, oh wow, that's why.
It's always a process. I had a writing teacher who actually shared with her class an old short story that she had written, and we sat there and we could pick apart what was wrong with it. But I mean, she was like a Hugo and Nebula Award winner, like at that time. So it was like, you're like, phew, everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, Jessica Borsey asks, in queries, do you prefer writers to get initially granular with their genre, or use the broadest category and the blurb fields in the rest? I will say, for the form itself, you do have to choose from a drop down of genres. But if yours isn't quite on there, just choose like whatever works best, and you can also clarify in your query. But I'm going to let the mentors answer the question about the query.
I would say if you can be specific, that's great. If you're not totally sure what genre, or if it's like multiple genres, you could say that too. Because obviously, like, we're going to help you. You know, if we get picked as the mentee, your mentor will help you with your query. So, yeah, I would go with whatever you think you can do. If you can go really granular, great. If you can't, then do it broadly.
I'd say let your comps, if you use comps or competitive or comparable titles, let them do the heavy lifting for you. So if you've got, you know, something that could cross into either genre, but I think comps help people envision things. So if you say, like, it's got the tone of something, you're saying a lot without having to write, you know, a lot of here's why. Usually I mean, not always, but usually I find that there's always like something that's just slightly more dominant if it's between two genres, and you can lean towards that and then say it will also appeal to readers who loved blah, blah, blah. And you're telling me about the setting, you're telling me about the kinds of characters you got, you're telling me a lot with that. So that's where comps can really be helpful. And again, we can, as mentors, help you. But check out like Goodreads and look at books and be like, that kind of feels like something I aspire towards, and you can use that as a great comp or comp.
Yeah, for the example given, steampunk versus speculative fiction, I would definitely use steampunk because that's a very defined genre. But we get every year some that are like, I have a mystery with romantic elements and a touch of thriller with the plot pacing of blah blah blah, and that can kind of like weigh down the query letter because you're like, what exactly is this? Blah asks, I love y'all's names. What are some the final decision make or break details for choosing your mentee once the submissions are narrowed down to a couple contenders that you're in love with?
That's a great question. I'd say for me, like, I actually, when I request a full from somebody, I actually ask them to fill out a series of questions as well. I have like a little survey, and they're all like very, very simple questions. They're not like intrusive or anything like that. But that's definitely helps like weigh in my decision. But I think sort of at the end of the day, it's not so much about the mentee or the book itself. It's whether or not I feel like I can help the book. So it's kind of on my shoulders. So, you know, as I'm reading something, and I often, you know, there's so many books that I have loved that I've just been like, I wish I knew what to do with this, and I don't. It's such a great book. So really, when I feel there's like that feeling of clarity as you're reading something where you're like, I really like this, and I think I know like this, and this could be help improve it. So like it's that clarity on my side, not necessarily anything that has to do with the mentee.
Someone said this in the first kind of chat that I got to be a part of, and I think it's worth saying again. And not everybody does this the same way, but there comes a time during submissions when mentors are able to reach out and ask for fulls if they're interested. They might do that early on, they might do that later. But I think if you are a mentee and you get that sort of email, you don't have to drop what you're doing and respond in seconds, but, you know, respond quickly, because that tells us that you're good about paying attention to your email, that you're a responsive person. And those little indicators, you know, kind of let us know, like, personality wise. Some people are okay if you're a little more, you know, some people are more relaxed and they're cool with, you know, 5 days, it's all right. Some people really want to make sure that you're in touch. I had somebody submit and they were like, I'm sorry, I was in a car accident and it's 1 day late. And I'm like, please, it's okay. Take care of yourself. They're like typing in the hospital, like, no. So don't do that. It's okay. But, like, you know, again, this is testing kind of professionalism. And what would you do if you got a job interview? You would respond, and you would respond, you know, quickly and fully answer. I know some people ask questions about you, like, what do you like to work, or how do you like to work, and what's important to you in your story. Answer those questions honestly, answer them, you know, accurately, quickly. For me, hopefully it's not getting myself in trouble. Like, after I read, I have like a set of questions that I ask, and I use that to kind of help either make my decision or confirm my decision based on kind of, and there's no right answer. It's just getting a vibe from how you answer.
All right. Anybody else? Since you mentioned it, Ayana, I did want to mention, because we always get this question a couple of times every year, is if you're going to be out of contact, like after the submission window, you can feel free to put a note in your query that says, I'll be in the mountains from this day to this day. I think it will happen less this year because fewer people are traveling, but you're welcome to do that. Or you can set up an email autoresponder as well. And so the mentors just know you're not ignoring them. You're just kind of out of touch for a couple of days. Kristen asks everyone's favorite question. What advice do you have regarding comp titles? If you're using a comp title, it's more of a bestseller. Would you elaborate as to why the comp fits? So just kind of answer the general question first, and then maybe the more specific question. Nobody.
I can go.
Okay.
I love comp titles. They're not for everybody. I used to hate them, but now for me, it's like, they always say, oh, where would your book fit in the bookstore? And I think it's more than that. I think one of the great things about comp titles is that it tells your mentor or potential mentor, or it tells your potential agent, that you know the market, that you are well read enough in the genre to understand what constitutes like what is doing well in the market and what is comparable to your book. Because the people that say, oh, there's no book that fits in my comps. And I heard an agent say this once on a panel, and I have to agree. If you can't find something within the last 5 years that is at least like a little bit comparable, then there's probably not a space in the market for it right now. That's not to say that there's not room for different stuff in the market. It's just saying you need to know the market that's out there right now. And then if it's more of a sell, I wouldn't elaborate as to why the comp fits. I think that you have to let the comps speak for themselves.
I will say, though, every time someone's told me there are no books like mine in YA, I can name like 5 off the top of my head that are like there. So there probably is a book like yours.
I was
Just
going to say
like one little thing. Oh,
go ahead. It's okay, Lyndsay. Go ahead.
Okay. I did like one little quick thing is that I feel like for pitchwars specifically, you don't necessarily need to be stuck in that 5-year window. That's it.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think I'll say what I said for the last live chat we did, which is that if you are having trouble with finding books that are good comps, like try and see if you can find anything like movie wise or TV wise, or some people said songs. They don't mind that. Those as comps for pitch wars. So yeah, I mean, get creative especially if you're having trouble. And yeah, as for the bestseller thing, like that's interesting. I wonder, because sometimes when you use like things like huge bestsellers, you got to wonder, or I wonder personally, like, well, what part of that bestseller does apply to your book? Because it could, you're not are you the next James Patterson? I don't know. Like, do I believe it? I don't know. It's just, for me personally, I wonder about these things. And obviously this is not everyone's opinion, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on what you think. It's sort of your stuff, because it's your book, it's your query. So you have to kind of like make that judgment yourself, I guess.
I just add, if you want to use a bestseller or a universe that's really vast, what you can do is you can use a specific character or a specific element. And I didn't plan this, but it worked out well. I pitched my book for DB Pitt, which is how I found my agent. I used Black Arya Stark, and that worked out really well because it was like a day after the thing happened. That I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but I didn't. I mean, that just worked out really nicely. And then my mentee last year, earlier this year, she wanted to use Game of Thrones. And I remember being like, okay, Game of Thrones is just so big. And so what we ended up doing was we kind of figured out that her main characters were a lot like Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. So we were like, why don't we use Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen meets North Africa, which is kind of like what inspired her world. And that worked out really well because she's got like the rebellious princess and also like the hopeful bastard, and it worked out really nicely, and people knew exactly what what their relationship was like and what was going on, without saying my book is just like Game of Thrones, because that just doesn't tell you as much. So if you really want to use a bestseller, that's one way to angle it without using that. So
yeah, I would agree with everything you guys just said about specificity. I think we're trying to get a sense of what your book is in conversation with the other books that are on the market. And so if you can come up with 2 comp titles that are different in certain ways, but you can identify where yours is in that overlap, I think that gives a really good idea of where your book fits.
All right, great. Katie asks, how do you categorize zombie novels? I don't want to submit to someone for whom it is a hard no. In particular, zombie stories told, like Warm Bodies, told from POV of zombie, not from POV of human survivor. Well, there's a couple questions here. So I will say, I think most mentors, if they are hard no on zombies, they probably put that on their wish list, because that's a pretty common one that people feel very strongly about. But yeah, so if you have a zombie that's kind of like Warm Bodies, what would you categorize that? What genre do you think that would be?
Isn't that like paranormal, or I guess it could be horror if you have more gore, I suppose it could be horror. Yeah, I think I said no zombies, so I'm one of those people.
what are the zombies
I think
doing?
it depends. Yeah, it depends on the feel of what's going on, because there's a hard difference between Warm Bodies and Walking Dead. So like, I think it just depends on the feel of the book, and my advice would be to kind of use that as your judgment.
I would go to Goodreads and look what it's been most shelved under. That's my secret for finding any genre. All right, so Jay asks, how do you feel about protagonists with PTSD, panic, anxiety? Some of my betas loved the mental health issues. Others wanted a stronger protagonist. I'm writing his own voices on this, but now I am unsure.
That's tough. I think it's tough to make certain characters like that active, I guess, and I think that's what she's getting at. But so like for me, I think if there's a way to make the protagonist relatively active while still dealing with those issues, like that's personally like where that'd be the sweet spot for me personally. But it's difficult. Like I can think of, so like Kaylin Josephson, who's mentoring an adult this year, her book Stormcrow, she has a character with depression, but she's like, so she, a lot of the book is spent dealing with her depression, but she also has to get out of that or like deal with it, and then there are plenty of action scenes because it's a YA fantasy. So like she kind of does a good job with doing both sides of that spectrum, and being what's the word, like true to depression at the same time. So like maybe that would help to look at that and see what she does.
I'm going to jump in too and say there are a lot of authors that deal with mental health in their books. The one that comes to mind right off the bat is Kathleen Glasgow, Girl in Pieces and How to Make Friends in the Dark. Those are deeply emotionally driven books, but the character also has a sense of motivation. And I think that's what's important when you're writing a book like that, is to still have plot happening, and that even staying true to those emotions, and you can incorporate those into the plot.
Did Dante just freeze? Okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I think it's about, and I think that this is what everyone's getting at, is about making sure that they have agency in some way so that they are making choices on the page. However that looks, so that their choices are influencing the plot, and that things are moving because of actions that they're taking. And I think that you can do a lot with that and still, deal with a really hard issues like that.
All right. Lauren has a question. What part of the submission package do you review first? The synopsis, query, first chapter. Everyone's a little bit different on this. I always like to hear everyone's different strategies.
I'm going for query first.
Yeah,
Me
same.
too.
Yeah, query first, then I'd like to jump into the first chapter. And I don't like to read the synopsis until I'm really serious about it because I hate being spoiled.
Yeah,
Ditto.
same. I read query first, and yeah, and then either I usually like decide how I feel and go one way or the other. But yeah, it sort of depends on the synopsis. I agree with you, Aunt Lyndsay. That's a better idea because then you don't end up getting spoiled.
All right. I do feel like maybe the mentors that tend more towards literary are more likely to say they read the pages, or they'll skim the query and try to get to the pages faster, which makes sense given the genre. Okay. Maxwell asks, what is your favorite part about mentoring?
Okay, I'll go. Because no one wants to go. I think it's, making a new friend, helping somebody who, hopefully is going to, benefit from whatever I can do for the, with them and for them. And like, that's for me the best part of mentoring. Hopefully making someone happy and making a new friend. And also getting to, spend time with all these lovely mentors behind the scenes.
I'm excited to have an excuse to argue with Liz Lawson some more.
I love the brainstorming. I think with every single one of my mentees, we've had a pattern of many shared Twitter DMs and Facebook Messenger things where we're just like working out like plot points and character issues. And like I've definitely like spent time at like my day job doing that. And my last couple mentees have been West Coasters while I'm an East Coaster. So I've definitely stayed up too late with talking to some of them on things because it's just so exciting to sit there and like work out the problems. Then when you get to that like solution, you're like, yes. Like, and it's just very satisfying. So it's like getting to like write a novel without having to do all the hard parts. So even though we're all working on our own novels too. So you just get that little like extra satisfying feeling of help somebody work through the problem.
Yeah, I've not mentored before, but I do have book coaching clients. And my favorite part about working with them is just like feeling like you're co-conspirators in some kind of puzzle and like teasing apart the plot threads. And then when you finally get it, just that joint satisfaction is so rewarding.
Jay had asked least favorite. We do try to keep it positive, but I think based on the dozens of times I've heard this question answered, everyone's least favorite part of mentoring is only getting to choose one, not being able to help many people. It's like every year the mentors are like begging for like extra spots and they want to have another mentor. So yeah. All right. We have a question for Jennieke and then we'll probably have to finish. But I do want to get to it because it says specifically for Jennieke. I saw on your wish list that you're open to fantasy and retellings. I'm wondering if this interest is restricted to historical in particular.
No, I'm open to all types of fantasy. And I think I have, retellings of every type. I'm open to it as long as it fits in sort of those other categories I have on there. And as far as fantasy, I'm taking contemporary fantasy, paranormal, and with like romantic elements. And in general, I like more fantasy with romance, but I'm open to it, whatever, as long as it sort of fits with everything else I've got on there.
Cool. Let's see. Okay, so I don't want to start switching over quite yet, but so we'll just look at this question real quick because I feel like we can talk about this. XNS in general, any advice how to enter publishing and/or pitch wars if you have a learning disability like dyslexia? Should I disclose it to explain many technical errors? Get professional editing. And I like it, contradicts me if you disagree. If you feel comfortable disclosing it, I feel like you can include that in your query letter. And also speaking about pitch wars directly, if you need any kind of accommodations due to a disability, feel free to email pitchwars. I just forgot our Gmail address, pitchwars@gmail.com. And we can help you out there too. And that's open to everyone, and it's on our website and everything. So yeah, does anyone have anything to add on that?
I would just say don't let that deter you in entering. I think most mentors would be willing to work with somebody on that. I had an ex-boyfriend who was dyslexic, and I used to work through his papers, and I mean it's absolutely something that is doable. So don't let that deter you from entering your manuscript.
Yeah. All right. So can I have the 5 of you just tell us where we can find you online, if you have any books that you want to promote before you head out, anything like that. So we'll just go around the circle and start with Dante. My voice cracked.
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. I am on Twitter at Dante Medema and Instagram at Dante Medema Books. My book comes out in less than a month, guys, and I have an awesome pre-order campaign if you want to go check it out.
You're muted, Emily.
I didn't go big and then I got confused. So you can find me on Twitter at EmilyGolden_ and on Instagram at EmilyGoldenEdits. And then my editing website is goldenmayediting.com. There's some courses and workbooks and stuff there if you're interested.
You can find me on Twitter mostly under Lyndsay Ely. That's LYNDSAY ELY. I am on Instagram, but I don't do a lot of book stuff over there. And I am on Facebook, but I almost do no updating there. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay, I am on Twitter and Instagram, Jennieke _Cohen. And also you can find me on my website, JennikeCohen.com. And my next book is My Fine Fellow, which will be out in January of 22. It's a little while from now, but it is a YA alternate historical about, so it's actually a My Fair Lady Pygmalion retelling, gender swapped with food. So yeah.
Hi. So I am on Twitter. I'm on Instagram if you want to see lots of pictures of baby elephants, because that's what I do there. And my debut, Beasts of Prey, is on Goodreads. It's very much a monster book if that's your thing. So you can add it there. And yep, reach out if you have any questions about wish list or want to talk about animals, because I love that.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And definitely go check out the mentors. They'll also be participating. Most of them will be participating in upcoming Twitter chats. And some of them, maybe, I can't remember exactly who, might be doing another video chat as well. So I can't remember who's gone yet and who hasn't. You have one more? Okay, cool. Yeah, so thank y'all. And we'll bring the next group of mentors on in just a second. We have, I'm just watching to see, we have Michaela, Laurie, Sasha, and Margie is here. And so we're just waiting on Aty. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and have the remaining the new mentors introduce themselves. And so mentors, just a heads up, you're going to appear on screen in a second. And we're going to have Margie go first. So if you could just introduce, say, your name, what you write, if you have a book that you'd like to promote, and your pitchwars history.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margie Fuston, and this is my first year as a pitchwars mentor. I was actually a mentee twice in 2017 and 2018. And my 2018 book actually comes out next summer, and it's called Vampires, Hearts, and Other Dead Things.
Thank you. Michaela, you're next.
Hi, I'm Michaela. I am in my 3rd year as a Pitchwars mentor. I'm an editorial intern at Entangled Publishing, previously Page Street Children's YA. And that's pretty much everything.
Laurie, you're up next.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Am I here? Hi, I'm Laurie. This is my 4th year as a mentor. I write YA of all kinds, fantasy, contemporary, kind of darker, suspensey type stuff lately. And yeah, just thrilled to be here.
All right, Sasha.
Hi, I'm Sasha. It's so great to be here. I'm a writer of young adult fantasy. I'm represented by the fabulous Hilary Jacobson at ICM. I was a mentee back in 2017. I was mentored by Mikkel George and Heather Cashman. They were fabulous. I was mentee sisters. We were mentored by them together with Kristen Walters. And this is our 2nd year co-mentoring. So we were co-mentors last year and had so much fun. We're so excited to be back.
And Aty.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aty S. Behsam. I am a writer, an artist, and a translator, Iranian. And I took part in Pitchwars in 2017 with my book, The Grace, and I've been mentoring for the 3rd year this year, which is an absolute honor, and currently working on a manga, actually. Excited.
All right, welcome. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. We still have questions from 40 minutes ago, so we're gonna just go ahead and dive right into the questions, try to get as many answered tonight as we can. And we have a great question to start off from JV. Any tips on writing query letters?
My tip is always to be as specific as possible. If you write anything vague enough, it sounds boring. You could write, Star Wars and the authorless Harry Potter and have them sound like the exact same book. You can write any person goes on quest, discovers self, the world is at stake. So adding those really kind of juicy, hooky world building things is what's going to make your book stand out, and it's what is going to make me want to read more.
I think definitely making sure you're bringing across the stakes of your story. I need to know why I should care, why your main character cares. And I think it's really easy to get bogged down with trying to describe the world and the characters and the plot. And really, we just need to know what makes us care about this and why we want to be here. And I think it gets left out a lot sometimes when people are trying to summarize the whole story in a mini paragraph.
What I see a lot is that a lot of people go on and explain about the word for a whole paragraph and then start talking about the character, which is no, it starts with the character. We need to care about the character, and then we need to care about the word. First, the character, who's the character? Why should we care? Yeah, I see a lot of word building in the first whole paragraph of word building, which is a big no.
I want to second the stakes because I often see that kind of come in at the very end. You're oh my gosh, this is 400 words now. I need to put the stakes here in my last sentence and get out. And so just make sure that you're actually really digging in there and explaining that. Because like Michaela said, that's the most important part for me in the query.
And for me, I think this kind of goes to what everyone else said too. shorter is better. Like if it's 400 words long in the pitch, that's probably way too long for a pitch for me. Like between 100 and 200 words for the pitch part. And that's really hard to do. But if you keep it down, like those specific, very specific things, who is this character? What does this character want? What's standing in their way? Like those are the things you need to hit, those stakes. And the tighter you can get it, I feel like the more hooky it is as far as like making me want to read more.
It kind of sounds like an old-timey riddle when someone is like, how long should a query letter be? And the answer is like, as short as it can be. All right. So Ebony asks, would you pick a book that was submitted before with revisions, of course? What are your tips on that?
I'll go. Yeah, I absolutely would. The past 2 years, I've had like a top 5 that I could have truly picked anyone from that top 5. And if any of those people ever subbed to me again, I would just be over the moon. But even if you weren't in the top 5, I think there's a lot of stuff with minor revisions that I've gotten in my sub inbox that I would love to work with. And I don't think I think a lot of mentors would take stuff that people have applied in previous years. And I think it's good to show that you've worked on it. Like you've been trying, you didn't just not get into pitch wars and stop working on it. You're constantly getting better. And I think that's good and important.
Yeah, actually, I would be glad because as you mentioned, it takes a lot of work to work on the same thing. It can be very frustrating, actually. So we all writers, we all know what revisions are, and they're monsters. So we know that it's very hard. And we also know that there's a certain place that the writer gets to with revisions sometimes that they feel very trapped. And they feel like whatever they do is like, they're making the book worse than better. So we understand that, especially after pitchwars, I feel that like it was my own experience. A lot of people touch their books again and again and again because they feel like it's not good enough, it's not good enough. So we get to a point that we don't know what's good enough anymore. So I think it would be good to have like a fresh pair of eyes looking at your, book after so much revision. Actually, that's good. Yeah, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. We had over 200 submissions last year, and we were able to pick one. There is not only one book out of that pile that I would have loved to have worked on. And I love the determination of submitting a book again. I love the craft that it takes to go back a year later and try to make a book better. So yeah, I'd love to see some of the submissions I got last year again this year.
And sometimes mentors, they pass or they decide not to request a book just because they weren't feeling it. And so like sometimes you can get, and when you rework your query, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is something I'm interested in because the query the first time may have just not, showcased that. Case in point, Sonia told me 2 years ago that one of my favorite YA books ever was submitted to me in Pitch Wars and I did not pick it. So she like ruined my life. All right. Bethany asks, how do you feel about YA mystery a la Big Little Lies? Is there any place in the market for it? I know nothing about the YA mystery market.
I can't speak to mystery. Suspense and thriller, that's what I'm hearing people are picking up right now. So, I mean, I think mystery is kind of close in that vein. But yeah.
I think there's always going to be a market for mysteries surrounding people behaving badly. I'd love to see a YA Big Little Lies. I mean, look at the success of One of Us is Lying. I absolutely think that there's a market for this, and I would love to see it.
All right. Katie asks, when you have 100+ submissions, yikes, how do you go about narrowing down the list and finding the ones you might want to pursue? So if y'all want to kind of talk about maybe how you go through your inboxes, might be fun for people to hear.
First is the query, of course. I take a look at the query always, and what I'm looking for in the query is always like they need to be clear, like no weakness, no like what happens now, and especially when it comes to the hook and everything and the character, I need to know if I'm invested in the character enough to actually take a look at this the whole submission. Sometimes the query though, the idea is nice. I can tell the query is not so good, but the idea is good. So I move on to the next part and I take a look at the synopsis, but that's it for me. If I don't like a synopsis, if I don't like the whole gist of the story, I don't usually move on to the first page or at all. But if I like that, you know, the pages are the last step for me. I need to know how the writing works.
So I work with a co-mentor. I co-mentor with Kristen Lambert. So she and I create a giant Google sheet where we go through, we write down every single one of our submissions in that Google sheet. And for our first pass, we both read every submission. For our first pass, we just note a yes, no, or a maybe. I typically read queries first. Kristen skips to the first 5 pages. And so it's kind of interesting. I like that we read differently. It's nice to have another brain sorting through the submissions with me. And then from there, we'll typically hop on the phone and kind of discuss the first rounds of fulls we want to request. But we do read every single submission, and I do read at least of everything, the query and the first 5 pages. It's time consuming and it can be a little overwhelming, but if somebody takes the time to submit to us, then I really want to honor that and honor their work. And so we try to be as thoughtful as we possibly can within that month that we're reviewing our submissions.
So yeah, for me, I read the query first, and I always read all the submissions and all the pages. I don't read all the synopses. I will read the query and the pages first, and then I'll kind of mark it down like this is something I want to see more of. The easy ones to filter out are the ones that don't like fit something that I was asking for, or something that I very specifically said I don't want this thing, or it's just not a good, not because it's not great, because it's just not a good fit for me to work on for all kinds of reasons, like having a critique partner who's doing something like that, or something I'm working on. So I'll read everything through the query and the pages, and then once I've kind of gotten that next list, then I'll go back and look at the synopsis and see what I want to request and go from there. I would say, just to an earlier thing, I was the lucky mentor last year who got to 2 mentees, and I think I was the only one, right, Sarah? But
yeah, I think we gave most of the spots to adult because we had a higher proportion of submissions in adult.
So yeah, so that was awesome. I that's an unusual experience to get 2 great mentees in 1 year. So
yeah, so I tackle my submissions box pretty similarly to Laurie. I read every query like twice. The first time I go through, I read them all. I don't read the synopsises. I just read the query and make a list of yes and maybe. And then going back through, I read all the pages for the yeses first. If it pulls me in, I keep going, and then I go through my maybe list, and from there I make a secondary yes, no, maybe list. But I go through everything multiple times because I get paranoid that I've missed something. And as a result, I'm definitely one of those mentors that's making requests like the entire reading period because I go through everything so many times. And I definitely get a little panicky that I haven't seen something. But yeah, definitely, like Laurie, I don't like to read the synopsis depending on what the genre is. I love mystery and thrillers and suspense. And if I am pulled in by the query of a mystery or suspense thriller, I will not read the synopsis. I will request the full. I want to be surprised sometimes. But stuff like fantasy and sci-fi, I absolutely read the synopsis because I just like to know where it's going.
Did everyone get a chance to answer?
It's my first time, so I don't know what I will do.
Sometimes you don't know.
I've not decided yet, but I've been listening to this and making a plan. So
yeah, it's funny because we, me and Ayana talked on the last YU video chat. We both like love spreadsheets and we're very like analytical and and she's like, oh, Sarah's probably like this too. And I was like, actually, my reading is so compulsive. Like it's weird. It's not what you would expect from me at all if you knew me. So yeah, everyone is a little bit different. I love it. Let's see, Jennifer, just to clarify, because I know you had a question about this, to participate in mentee submission, you cannot have self-published. I'm not clear on this. So you can't have self-published the book that you are submitting. So if you have self-published another book and you're submitting a book that has not been self-published, that's fine. It's just the book itself, and not the author. Not Found asks, what usually grabs you in the first pages that makes you want to read on?
Voice. Yeah, the first thing that grabs me is voice. If the voice is good, I'm like, give me more. I need more. Yeah, so voice and character is what gets me.
Yeah, I was going to say voice too, which is probably not what everybody loves to hear, but yeah, great voice. I think something I see a lot is a lot of stories don't start in the right place. And I think if you can see that voice is there and you can see that the concept is there and I'm really into it, then I'm going to request more because that's something you can work on. But you can work on voice too. That just takes a lot more time, I feel like, than what we have in the mentorship period. So voice is a big one for me.
Yeah, voice and stakes, knowing what somebody wants. It doesn't have to be what they're going to want for the rest of the book. It doesn't have to be this huge thematic thing, but I need something propelling me forward. I need something giving me, the motivation to turn the page. A good piece of advice I heard for YA literature, and like all advice, it's not universal, but your book should start the day your main character's life changes. And I think that Red Queen does this really, really well, where Mare goes to the market and she's arrested. And it's not that it opens with her finding out she has magic powers. You don't have to jump into it quite at that point, but we immediately know that something has changed and we immediately know how desperate this character is. And we get a sense of what's going to propel the rest of the plot forward.
Yeah, I think similarly to what Sasha said, the pages starting kind of where your character changes. I think I like to look at it as in you're kind of zooming in on this specific moment, but they're living their life. So we don't want to start anywhere. You don't want to start too quickly in the action to where we have no idea where we are, where we're grounded, but like we're just coming into the scene. And I think also adding everyone likes voice for me as well. But I think I also like a little bit of mystery. I just finished reading Ninth House, which isn't YA, but on that first page, it starts off with her cleaning blood off her sweater. And I was immediately, why is she cleaning blood off her sweater? What's happening? I need to know more. Little things like that really pull me in very quickly. And bare minimum, I'm going to keep reading until I figure out why I kept reading until I figured out why she had blood on her sweater. So I think also like a little bit of mystery, not direct, like so direct is also good too sometimes.
I'll also add that I'm a sucker for a beautiful sentence. So I'll probably keep reading. If your prose sucks me in, I'll probably keep going and we could work on plot and character. But that's probably one of the things that will really, really grab me.
All right, great. We have a question from Sarah. I'm going to ask though, did any of you request thematically dark stories? Okay, cool. So we can answer this. I'm worried there's not enough murdery stuff in mine. How much murder/darkness are you looking for? This is not a concern I have about my books, but now I'm worried I don't have enough darkness and murder in my books.
I love the idea that I like have a body count. It's like fewer than 5 bodies and I'm out. I think that you can write a thematically dark book with 0 murder. I think that for me, it's more weaving in the sense of dread, the uncanniness. You can have horror without a drop of blood. So yeah, there's no body count for me. I love some murder, but a murderless book is okay.
Same. I'm a big fan of murder. I'm a true crime fanatic. But you definitely can have a dark story without murder. Like Sasha said, upping the terror, upping the suspense, and the fear really does have the same effect. If your atmosphere is dark and gloomy, you don't necessarily need murder.
Y'all made me think about Baby Teeth. Have y'all read that?
I'm reading that right now.
Oh yeah, it's really dark.
I love it though.
And
it's
you
so
can
good.
always add.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say you can always add more murder too. Like that's not a problem.
Margie's like, you can kill more people.
I agree with everyone else. I agree with everyone else. You don't have to kill people to make your story dark. Sometimes actually stories kill people, but they're not dark. So it's not, murder doesn't mean darkness. Darkness in the story, I think, has more to do with the psychology and the state of mind of the character. So focus on that if you want to write darker stories. Everyone calls me the queen of black hole because I can't see the light. I'm always like, darkness. Give it to me. Give me all the dark. Yeah. But no, just pay attention to the state of mind of the character and how they see the world. That can be really dark. It doesn't have to be like people dying everywhere. The character can live a very normal life, but they don't think that they're living a normal life. Maybe they think they're living in hell. So we have to experience it, how it is to live in hell through their mind. So that's dark. Yeah.
Nice. We have a lot of market questions today. Can you talk about why fantasy retellings, any place for them, or is there too much fatigue?
I'm like, I don't think she can. I'm like looking at Michaela because she works in the industry, and I just like am always in my bedroom writing. I'm like, Michaela, what's selling?
No, I mean, I think there's always retellings on the market. I think every Tuesday when books drop, there's something that's retelling some story. I think there's definitely a place for them. I think just finding new and fresh ways to tell a story is always good. I think of because I think I saw a question also about retellings and comps. And a while back, I read a Jane Eyre meets Dexter retelling that I thought was incredible. And the comps for that were incredible. So I think taking current and modern media and ideas and fusing them with classics or stories that we've all seen. Like, I think there's a million Beauty and the Beast retellings, but I love every one I've read and they keep making them. They keep coming out. So I say go for it.
Yeah, I agree. I love a retelling. And if you can find new, fresh ways to tell a story, then it never gets old. And to immediately be able to hook an audience with something that feels a little familiar and then put your own twist on it, I think can be really compelling. I'd also love to see retellings of stories that I'm not familiar with. I'd love to see non-Western mythology. And I'd love to see my world expanded through tellings of stories that I haven't been exposed to in kind of my own Western canon.
All right. Yeah, I feel like anytime you say anything's dead, someone's going to come along and prove you wrong. All right, so synopsis question, a very specific synopsis question. Susan Dennard's structure starts with a sentence of world building. Other friends say to start with characters. What synopsis structures do you recommend? I remember one of the mentors tweeting, I think yesterday, their number one advice for people preparing for pitch wars is to stop stressing about your synopsis so much. So there's that. But do you have any thoughts on this character versus world building?
Mine would be, don't stay on something for too long, because synopsis has to be very short. So you have to sit down and think what is it that we need to know about this story. Like word building, what is that specific thing that we know about? We have to know about the word building in order to understand the story. We don't need to know what all the sort of magic. I don't know what's happening. We don't need to know that. Like, you don't have that many words to work with. You have to stick to the things that we need to understand the story. Like, same goes like with characters. Like, don't introduce like 10 characters in your synopsis. It's like 1, 2, 3. That's enough. Like, the main characters, the characters that the story cannot go on without. So you have to focus on the very core of the story and make us understand, like, this is the actual story, but there's a lot of meat to it. So show us the bones. We don't need to see the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree with everything Aty said. And I think too, it's kind of dependent on your genre. So if you have a fantasy and there are really different things going on in that fantasy world, like that's where we kind of need that grounding. Sci-fi is probably the same way, but I think a lot of contemporary, if it is contemporary in all the various different forms, you can start with that character and show us, that character's world while you're introducing us to the character.
Yeah, I'd also echo the advice not to stress so much about your synopsis. For me, the only point of a synopsis is for me to make sure that you have a story thread that generally makes sense. That I'm not going to invest, 60,000 words into a book that I think is a contemporary romance and then zombies show up. I also have actually, I kind of want to read that now.
That's when I started requesting synopses, when the book changed genres like 40,000 words in.
Yeah, and I think that I've never not requested materials because I thought the synopsis was poorly written. Like, that's never been a reason that I've not moved forward with somebody. So yeah, let it go a little. It's gonna be okay.
I just had a thought while y'all were talking, and I think some of the best synopsis I've seen kind of start with a combination of character and world building. So I'm thinking, like, if I were to write a synopsis for like This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is one of my favorite most recent books, I would start introducing the characters in the context of their world, and so you can combine both of them, so you don't have to choose one or the other. Okay, Renegade Drummer asks, my book has more of a YA tone, but would a higher level of violence make it new adult simply due to gory scenes?
I think young adult has, in the past few years at least, changed a lot in a matter of like what's considered dark for young adult. Like, a lot of young adult books are now very dark. Like, if we had them like 10 years ago, people would be like, this is not young adult, this is definitely adult. But now it's like the standards like of being a young adult, I think, are higher. Actually, this is what we were considering. It's a different sort of medium, but we were considering, because like I said, I'm working on this manga with the amazing writer Behsam, and we were considering like we needed it to be like a young adult sort of thing, because the character is like 16, 17. But at the same time, we were like focusing on how we can make this story thematically stick to young adults, not just think about, oh my god, this is too gory for young adults. Like, you can always like level it down in revisions. You don't need to think about that right now. You can always change it. Like, you can show murder in like 400 ways. You can like have it in middle grade, you can have it like in adult, it doesn't matter. You can change the way it's worded and the way it's depicted. So don't worry about that, I think, but don't worry about that. But I think it should medically sort of stick to young adults. Like young adults about like becoming independent, like seeking a life for themselves, and becoming a whole person, and stepping like closer to becoming like independent and everything. So it's like you should be more focusing more on the thematic like and content of your story, rather than like, oh my god, this scene is too dark. Like you can revise that later.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of young adult literature that's very violent. Ember in the Ashes is one of the most brutal third acts I have ever read, full stop. I would just say craft-wise, make sure that every scene of violence or gore serves a purpose thematically, that you're not putting violence in just for violence sake. If you put too much violence in, it's not going to make your book edgy, it might just make it hard to read. But as long as every scene of violence has a point, I think that you can get away with a lot in YA literature. Nobody's more macabre than teens.
All right, so we had a couple of questions there about comps, and I feel like they were adequately answered in the last comp discussion. So if you missed that, make sure you go back and rewind. So Ebony asked, what is a YA word count you're comfortable with?
I think it depends on the genre. Obviously, fantasy word count is going to be a little higher than, say, contemporary. But I typically, for time's sake, especially if something needs bigger revisions, I would like it to be below 110 at the max. I've definitely gotten some 180 submissions, and time-wise, there's just no way that I could personally make that happen. So I think for me, below 110, but I definitely advise looking up like genre specific word counts, because you don't want to be too far in one end, low or high, for what the industry standard is for your genre.
I got a submission like 210,000 words. It was fantasy. I got that, but it's not just about the time. Like we don't have that time to revise that book in pitchwars. It's also about how I sat down thinking, well, I like this story. I like the idea of the story, but I knew that the author could actually do it on their own. They could sit down and actually cut out the words. So, well, we comment at Pitchwars, we comment in the second, in the second place, and we try to help you with the revisions. But that kind of word count, it has never seen revisions, I'm pretty sure. So with the idea, I was like, no, it hasn't been revised. So I was like, okay, she can do it on her own. And I actually told her that, you need to cut it down a little bit. And it's my advice for you. Just cut it down a little bit, because you can have the best story in the world, but people get scared of when they see that word count. They're like, no, I can't. Yeah, so you can do it on your own. It's okay. You trust yourself, revise it, and try again. Yeah.
All right, and I dropped a link in the comments that just has some like general numbers. Of course, they're guidelines. There's always exceptions to every rule, right? XLK, I'm not gonna, that's okay. XLKUNAX. Generally, for those who have been a mentor before, how many submissions do you get? Did y'all answer this question? It was the last group that answered this question, right? Okay, just making sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michaela.
Okay, so my first year, I got around 130, I believe. And then last year, similarly, like 120.
I mentioned earlier, we got over 200 last year. Our list was very broad. We narrowed it this year intentionally. But like I said, we read everything. So don't let the big numbers deter you. I know that sounds scary. But if you've done your research, you're already at the top of the pile.
Yeah, I think for me, it was around like somewhere in the 180s last year, and very similar to that the year before I mentored with a co-mentor, and we had about the same amount.
I think last year we had around 200, and I was co-mentoring with amazing Kyle Shakti. So, and it was like we asked for like literally everything because we were like so excited to work together. We were like, give us everything you have. And then when the submissions came, we were like, maybe we should have like sat down and talked about this before, but just kept coming. But it was like such an amazing experience that this year I actually narrowed it down, not because like I don't want to read submissions. I think it's one of my favorite parts of pitchwars, reading submissions. I'm like, it opens my eyes to the fact that there are so many writers with so many different ideas. It just makes me so happy. I'm like, oh my God, I feel so blessed to be able to read these. And yeah, it's just my favorite part of pitchwars, to be honest.
Aw.
But narrative, yeah, it's so amazing. And I am very emotional. Everyone can tell. But I'm like, I want to hug everyone. I'm like, oh my God, you're so special. All of you are so good. Yeah, I'm very emotional. So anyway, but I narrowed it down this year because I think I want to go more with, like, it's my third year, and I want to go more with how I feel rather than go with this rather than this for once, and think that what I want to make myself suffer more and make it harder to choose. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do this year.
I will say we see this question a lot, and I understand like the impulse to know the numbers because it feels like it gives you some sort of like control or knowledge. But like sometimes those numbers don't really mean a whole lot, because I know there are years where I got like 60, 50 submissions where I had 4 or 5 manuscripts I co-mentored, and other years where I got hundreds, and there was like a clear one that I wanted to mentor. And so sometimes the numbers aren't exactly like indicators of like your competition, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's just magic. Sometimes you just connect with something. David asks, and this is going to be, I feel like I'm in college again, point of order. Are you open to giving feedback on a submission if the author wasn't accepted and reaches out to you after the selection process is done? Would that be horribly gauche, presumptuous? So part 1 is we do not allow the mentors to say whether or not they will give feedback. And the reason for that is in previous years, 3 or 4 years ago, the mentors did say that, and the ones that did say they would give feedback got inundated with submissions and then weren't able to provide the feedback because of the number of submissions. And so we just don't want to, we don't want that to happen again. So they can't answer that question. But the second part of the question is you should only reach out to a mentor asking for feedback if they have indicated that they are open to that. So some of them will say after submissions have ended that if you didn't select me and you'd like me to provide feedback or whatever, feel free to email me or DM me on Twitter or whatever. But if they haven't said that, then just assume that they are not open to it. All right. Grace has a question I can't wait to hear y'all's answer to. What brings you to Pitch Wars continually when, or even Margie, you haven't mentored before, but I mean, you've been around the community. When it requires so much investment of your time and energy, yeah. Why do you do it when it's so much work?
For me, coming into it this first year, I just really believe in the program, and I think it's so awesome. And like I'm still like really good friends with my mentors and like just the whole community. Like I got even though I didn't get an agent in 2017, I think most of my critique partners I have now came out of that experience. So I just really wanted to be a part of it on the other side. and try and give somebody else what I got out of it.
Yeah, I'll echo what Margie said. I was a mentee back in 2017, and I came back as a mentor because I wanted to give somebody what I got. I feel like I owe so much of my current career to Pitch Wars. Writing can be really lonely, and the Pitch Wars community is pretty unrivaled. It made me feel connected to other writers in a way that I'd never felt. And I also feel like it makes me a better writer. Critiquing makes me a better writer. It makes me realize what works and doesn't work in my own work. Reviewing submissions, I feel like teaches me how to write a hook. So while it warms my heart to give back, I also feel like every moment that I spend in Pitch Wars also is improving me.
I agree with a lot of what Sasha said. And also, I was a mentee in 2012. That was a very long time ago. But back then, we didn't have the Facebook groups and the Slack and all that stuff that there is now. But through that experience, I learned stuff from my mentor that I couldn't read in a book, like about her experience and navigating querying and all these things that like I couldn't get anywhere else. I was so grateful for that. And then my writing friends who have been my rocks for all these years all came out of that experience, and we're all still friends to this day. So I think it's a combination of wanting to give back and do that for more people, because it feels so isolating to be alone at your computer writing, to have that connection with other people who understand both what writing is like, but also what this industry is like, which doesn't compare to many others. So yeah, but also I feel like it does improve my own writing to see, like, I love going through the submissions. I love when I get really excited about something, and it's just like when you're in the bookstore and you see something, or you read a great blurb on the back and you can't wait to read it. It's like the best feeling. And to get to read these amazing manuscripts before they're out on the shelves.
Just echoing what everyone else has said, I joined because I want to help authors work on their books and get them out there. There's so many YA stories that have changed my life when I was younger, continue to change my life. And as a mentor, you see so many different kinds of books in your sub inbox and so many stories that you just know need to get out there. And I think Pitch Wars encourages so many people and helps so many people find community that keeps them going and raises the chances of those books reaching the readers that need them most. And that's something I'm very passionate about. That's why I'm interning in publishing, want to work in publishing full time. I also think it's important for me as a Black woman to be kind of a example. There's not a lot of Black women editors, and there's not a lot of Black women working in publishing in YA and doing Pitch Wars. I know the first year I did it was like the most Black women with and interns that there had been. And I really loved that. And I think it showed a lot of people you could do this too. You can be a part of this. I found Pitch Wars, like I started off blogging and booktubing, and that got me into book Twitter. And then I met Ashley Hearn, who works for Page Street, and she mentored Tomi Adeyemi, and she introduced me to Pitch Wars. Like all of that can happen just from one person seeing your journey. And they can become inspired. And that's something I think about constantly, is that someone else will see this and think I can do this too. And this is something I want to do. And it can just spark someone else's joy as much as it is mine.
So adding to that, my experience has been a little bit different. So I'm from Iran. I still live in Iran. And when I started like writing in English, like which is not like my language at all, it's like Persian Farsi, I couldn't find any Iranian writers who would, write English novels and would like publish outside and would be like a part of the community and everything. I looked and looked, and I think I was 18 or something. And I felt so lonely, to be honest. I was like, oh, there's no way I can do this. Like, there's no way I can do this. If there was a way, someone would have done it already. So, no, there's no way I can do this. But it was this, the following years were like this, like the mixture of heaven and hell, where you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm stepping into this world full of writers. And at the same time, you're like, there's no way I can do this. There's no way I'm going to ever be accepted here. Because like, and there were like some words out there, like there were, I have been told that, you know, why would anyone like want your stories? You're like, literally, why would anyone want your stories? Like, as long as they're like English speakers writing the stories. Like, I've been told all sort of stuff, but I sat down with myself and I told myself, well, become someone that you wanted to have back then. And so to echo what Michaela said, yes, like I want other like Persian Iranian writers to just realize that they're not as like hated as they think they are. They and don't isolate themselves and don't think that, you know what, nobody wants to read my stories, nobody wants to like have anything to do with me, because that's what we've been like we've been grown up with, we've been raised with, and that's what we've been told for so many years. So pitchwars was, I think, yeah, it was like way back then, and I think it was one of the first like communities that I saw that writers are like from all over the world are like in the same place. And I cannot tell you the sort of experience that I had with it. I was like, what? Like, they don't even care who's from where. And right now it might not sound like a big deal, like the world has changed in the past few years, but back then it was like, it was a huge deal. And I fell in love, to be honest. And also I really enjoy, I'm a selfish person, okay, I'm gonna say it, I'm a selfish person. I enjoy helping others, and I pretend that I'm helping them, but actually I feel good about helping them, so I'm doing it for myself. So yeah, I love helping, especially writers, because I don't want anyone, I want to do everything I can so that no one feels as lonely and as miserable that I did, like when I was 18, 19, and feeling like the whole world, feeling like you're born in this like wrong place, like all sorts of dark sort of way of thinking, like questioning everything about your existence just because you want to write and you want people to read your stories. So I want to do it as much as I can to make sure it doesn't happen to the others. So yeah, pitchforks is like, yay.
All right, great. Wow. Thanks, Grace, for answering or asking that question. I don't remember. Oh, when Laurie was speaking, I noticed her shirt and I was like, oh, I love that shirt. It's from Schitt's Creek, if anyone doesn't get the reference. Watch that show. It's great. Okay. So Victoria Mann asks, if I have a very small booktube channel and a slightly larger bookstagram, are those things worth mentioning in my query, or should I leave them out?
I would leave them out. Like, it doesn't reflect on your writing. Your writing should show that I want to like work with you, not the number of your followers, or if you have like books in no. I would say just leave that out, because I don't want to know about your social but I'm gonna stalk your Twitter. Other than that, no, I don't think it's the right place to talk about it. Maybe later, if you become a mentee, we can talk about this.
I think you can absolutely put it in your bio. As someone who started off booktubing and book blogging, I think it's great. And it definitely would make me feel like instant connection. And I don't think there's anything wrong with putting it in like the bio section of your query. But also a lot of mentors, if they request, they typically ask questions of mentee hopefuls. And that's another place where you can probably drop that if you don't drop it in your query.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that's a great thing to put in a query to agents. I don't think it's necessary to put in your query for pitch wars.
Yeah, if somebody wants to put it in their bio, I'd love to see it. We also send an email when we request polls that give you an opportunity to tell us more about yourself. It's hard with pitch wars when you can't personalize to every single mentor that you're submitting to. But if somebody wants me to know something about them and puts it in their bio, I'm happy to see it.
All right, Margie, you had anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's fine to put it in there. It's not going to make or break, how I feel about the query in general. But yeah, I would definitely go stalk you with the information.
I'm trying to scroll through your questions because we only have like a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure if we have any that are kind of like different from anything that's been asked, that we get to them first. Oh, let's talk about prologues. Everyone's favorite controversial subject. How do you think of a prologue written from a different POV from the rest of your manuscript in order to introduce things that your MC isn't aware of yet? And feel free to just go ahead and expand on that and let us know your thoughts on prologues.
I'm the resident prologue apologist. I have a prologue in my book. It's existed since the first draft. It still exists. I loved my prologue. I think that if a prologue gives your reader information that they cannot get at another place in the book, then they're fine. I would keep it short. I would keep it sweet. I would keep it essential. I have heard prologues called the throat clearing of novels. If you're just clearing your throat and it helps you get into the groove of writing, you can delete it later. But if a prologue serves a purpose and it hooks me in, I'm all for a prologue.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of prologues. Both my past mentees had prologues and we kept them and I loved them. They were, like Sasha said, short, but they were both were kind of flashbacks to an event that was important for the rest of the book that you didn't get anywhere else. So just echoing that, it definitely needs to be something that is extremely important to the story and pulls you in.
Fan of prologues here. Just announcing that. And I agree with everything that Sasha said. Yeah. And to be honest, every time someone hates on prologues, I'm like, it can be good though. Don't hate on them. I'm like, they can be good. It depends on the story and it depends on like how it's executed. It's like, don't hate on them. They're okay.
So I'm not a big fan of prologue, so I will see the other side of this. And specific to this question, I think the trouble with starting with a different POV character than the character who's the main character through the rest of the book, I sometimes feel like disjointed between that jump. And that's, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of prologues. I've had a mentee who I've asked to cut the prologue in the past. So again, that's a preference thing. And I'm saying all that to also say, Andrea Contos, who is also a mentor, her wonderful book, Throwaway Girls, has a wonderful prologue. So she's proved me wrong. Maybe you can prove me wrong too.
I have to agree with Laurie. I'm not the biggest fan of prologues, but I mean, I'm not saying that that's an absolute no for me, but they just really, really have to be necessary. Like back when I was teaching creative writing, like 95% of the time, I would tell the student, cut this prologue because you don't actually need it. But there is that 5% of the time when I actually feel like, yes, this has to have a prologue. So it just depends.
Just adding a little thing to the discussion about prologues. The prologues that I like mostly have some sort of a connection to the rest of the story. They don't feel out of place, even if like the POV character is not the same as like it's not the main character or anything. So I always I teach writing in general, and I always tell my students that you need to keep, if you want to understand that, if you want to see if your plot makes sense, you have to see if there's like this sort of chain that connects the whole thing together. If something feels out of this chain that doesn't connect, you have to either cut it out or revise it, or maybe even change the place. And it goes the same for prologues as well, because if the prologue feels like it's not connected to the story at all, like you read the first chapter and you read the prologue and you read the first chapter and you don't feel any connection between these two, you forget about it. You forget the prologue, so it doesn't matter. But if you feel like they're happening in the same universe, they're happening, like you see some characters maybe in the prologue and you see them here, an event has happened and now you see the impact or something, some sort of a connection to the rest of the story, I think that would help the prologue make sense and like, be worth it. Yeah.
Great. All right. And I will say, just from a point of order again, a rule note is you can actually submit to Pitchwars. Since you only submit your first chapter, you can submit your first chapter instead of a prologue if you are worried about the prologue damaging your chances, basically. So just a heads up, you can do that. If your prologue is very short, you can submit the prologue and the first chapter as well. Because some prologues will be like a scene or like a page, so. All right, so that's all the time we have all of the questions we have time for today. I knew today was going to be a rough day. So you can find most of these mentors are doing Ask Mentor Twitter chats coming up. Some of them might be doing an additional video chat as well, so make sure you check them out. And I'm going to ask each of them to just kind of close us out with anything you want to promote, any book you have coming out, anything like that, and also where people can find you on social media and that kind of thing. We'll just go ahead and go around the circle, starting with Margie.
My book is Vampires, Hearts, and Other Dead Things, and it's about a girl who goes to New Orleans in search of a vampire to save her dying father. So you can add that on Goodreads if it sounds good. And you can find me on Twitter at Margie Fuston, or Margie_Fuston on Twitter, and Margie Fuston on Instagram.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
You can find me on Twitter at Bay Radley, on Instagram at Bay_Radley, although I don't really check my Instagram that often. And I also have a forum on the Pro Boards Pitchwars forum. You can find me a lot of different places. But if you have any questions, just at me on Twitter, or my DMs are open currently.
I just want to say, Michaela, the first time I saw your username, I literally laughed out loud. I thought it was the funniest thing.
I know, I can't let it go. I started it like when I was booktubing and book blogging. That was my handle, and now I'm just emotionally attached.
Aty, go ahead.
I wasn't sure how the circle works. So currently I'm working on a manga with the amazing Moeda Bisaina, and you can actually follow the process if you're interested on Instagram, Darian Saga. And the story is about a time in ancient Persia. So it's on Voices, ancient Persia, from which we don't have a lot of stories and written history. And so it's like a fantasy book, especially what happened. And so it's about how writing the stories it was forbidden because the monster in the stories, because of some curse on the land of Persia, they would become alive. So the king was like, no more stories, everyone, no more stories. So the main character is a writer, and he's like, no, I want to write the stories. So he sort of like joins the army against the writers to hide himself. So that's the gist of the story. If you're interested, you can follow it on Darian Saga on Instagram, and also you can find me literally everywhere. I don't know why I'm doing this to myself, but I'm everywhere. You can just Google Aty Behsam. You can find me everywhere. I'm on Instagram. It's Aty _S Behsam. I'm on Twitter. Ask me on Twitter, and I'll be faster with answering your questions. Aty Behsam. So I'm everywhere.
Sasha?
You can find me on Twitter at Sasha P. Smith, on Instagram at Sasha Peyton Smith. Happy to answer questions about my wish list on Twitter, and stay tuned for more announcements.
Ooh, that sounds promising. Laurie?
I'm on Twitter at Laurie Dennison. My Instagram is Laurie A. Dennison. The best place to ask me questions is probably Twitter. My DMs are open. You can @ me there. I have a profile in the forum, but I haven't even looked at it this year. So if you've sent me a question there and I haven't seen it. So yeah, Twitter is the best place to reach me with questions.
All right, and I am Sarah Nicolas. This is my YouTube channel, so if you would subscribe down there, that would be really cool. I do other things in addition to Pitch Wars chats, and I interview agents, and I have a bi-weekly publishing talk show. So, and then you can find me on Twitter, Sarah_Nicolas. Sarah has an H, Nicolas has no H. Always, that was a terrible name to write under. I'm just saying. All right, so thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank our mentors for joining us, volunteering their time to answer everyone's questions. And everyone stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.